All right, Fred, are we ready to start? Teams, ready to start?
Yes. Here we go.
All right, welcome to round 20, the last game of the finals. Winner of this game will be the champion. Let's just set the buzzers one more time. Okay, and if you just do me a favor, when you buzz in, can you tilt the buzzer so I can see the light just so I know the buzz? All right.
Can I get 30 seconds?
All right, go ahead.
Actually, really good.
All good? All right, this is toss-up one. A plant-derived auxin-inducible system triggers this process in targets to produce conditional mutants. An unusual stimulation for a form of this process is the binding of ornithine decarboxylase to its antizyme in response to high polyamine levels. The rate of this process is partly governed by the N-end rule and is enhanced by PES sequences and other degrons. Cathepsins directly perform this process and are activated by the acidity of the lysosome. This process can occur in a ubiquitin-dependent form via the proteasome. For 10 points, name this process performed by proteases, the catabolism of proteins.
Protein degradation.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I don't know.
Bonus. This poem was written while its author was recovering from a leg amputation. For 10 points each. Identify this poem whose speaker declares that I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul.
Invictus.
This Victorian poet wrote Pro Rege Nostro, but is almost exclusively known for penning Invictus.
Henley.
I'm Hensley. The speaker of Invictus declares that, under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is this three-word condition.
I don't know.
Answer.
Master Wall.
Bloody but unbowed.
What was the?
Let's resolve that one immediately because that just may be an S straight letter.
We said Henley, didn't we?
Henley is what was said, and that is correct, yes.
That is
Okay.
good. Okay, thank you.
All right, okay.
We're getting 20.
All right, so that is 20 on that bonus. Here's toss-up 2. Jack Michael identified 12 total operations that drive this psychological phenomenon. A type of therapy developed by William Miller and Stephen Rolnick is named for this kind of interviewing. The namesake salience of this phenomenon is composed of incented and aversive forms. Frederick Hertzberg's two-factor theory couples levels of hygiene factors to levels of this psychological phenomenon. Internal push factors...
Is this stress?
No. Internal push factors and goal-derived pull factors combine to create this phenomenon. For 10 points, then the psychological phenomenon of being willing to initiate behavior, which industrial psychologists study with regard to employees.
Choice.
This is motivation.
There's no way.
We go to toss-up 3. A cuneiform tablet which lists Nebo Sarsekim as a court eunuch suggests the historicity of a list of Babylonian officials in this biblical book. This book is the only work of prophecy to contain content which scholars attribute to the Deuteronomist source. A passage in this book referring to a new covenant was later reinterpreted by Christians as referring to Christ's institution at the Last Supper. This book's prophet buys a field in Anathoth, breaks a clay jug in front of the priests, and wears an oxen yoke which the false prophet Hananiah breaks. The king Zedekiah throws the prophet of this book into his...
Jeremiah?
Yes.
Nice.
At the center of this fresco, the title character wearing a yellow tunic and a green cloak uses a pulley attached to a tree to get water from a well for some sheep. 10 points each. In this fresco in the Sistine Chapel by Sandro Botticelli. At the bottom right, the title character kills an Egyptian with a scimitar, and at the top left, he removes his shoes.
Okay, come on,
Answer.
like Moses?
The Youth of Moses or the Trials of Moses. Botticelli also painted this scene in which the title Love Goddess stands on a floating seashell. It can be found in the Uffizi Gallery.
Birth of Venus.
This character appears to the right of Venus in that painting, holding a pink cloth. As in Botticelli's Primavera, this character is wearing a dress embroidered with blossoming patterns and is covered in garlands.
Okay, who's with Zephyrus? Oh, Chloris?
Is Flora. So we have 10 on that bonus. And here's toss of 4. A mountain in this region has a large lake in a crater at its peak and is named Academy of Science. Indigenous people from this region, including the Atelmans, frequently lamented that the big raven god Cook created such an inhospitable world. A formation of large stones called the Three Brothers appears to guard the mouth of Avacha Bay on the coast of this peninsula. A subspecies of brown bear from this peninsula has subtly...
Kamchatka?
Yes. In May 2018, archaeologists found the remains of a man who appears to have escaped the destruction in this city, only to be crushed by an unrelated boulder. 10 points each. Name is Roman City, whose remains were preserved after it was covered by ash from the eruption of nearby Mount Vesuvius, along with nearby Herculaneum.
Okay. Pompeii.
One of the prominent primary sources for the destruction of Pompeii is a letter by this man who described watching the eruption from a distance and told of the death of his uncle, the general who tried to rescue citizens.
So, Pliny?
More?
The younger.
Yes.
Okay.
This house near Pompeii contains some of the best preserved examples of Roman painting, a series of frescoes which most scholars think depict initiation into a Bacchian cult.
Probably the Villa.
Answer.
Villa Stabia.
It's the Villa of Mysteries.
Okay, that's
20.
For
Yes.
part 3 of bonus, after Casa 3, we said Flores, right?
Yeah.
Chloris is the answer given. I have Flora.
Could you reread me the text?
This character appears to the right of base in that painting holding a pink cloth. As in Botticelli's Primavera, this character is wearing a dress embroidered with blossoming patterns and is covered in garlands.
We want to protest that.
Okay, protest is-
Flores and Flora is the same person.
All right. We'll note that and
We
Flora.
said Flores, who is the same person.
All right.
Flores.
Did we say Flores?
No, we said
I was
Flores.
there.
Flores. Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, we want to protest that.
All right, so we will do that.
No, CHLORIS. Flores.
Okay. All right, protests will be researched, and we're going to move on now to toss of 5. In a poem named after these animals by Patrick Galvin, the narrator's father remembers his days with the Royal Munster Fusiliers while speaking to these animals. In another poem, a shudder in the loins of one of these animals engenders the broken wall.
Swan.
Yes. This philosopher used the thought experiment of people reacting to a child falling down a well to show that humans are innately good. 10 points each. Name this second sage, an ancient Chinese philosopher who lends his name to the last of the 4 books. Sorry? Mencius? Mencius followed his teacher Sisa and elaborated the doctrine of this concept, the medium between extremes. Sisa's book with that title is the second of the 4 books. Aristotle develops his ethics around the virtuous example of this thing. Yes. The 4 books were compiled by this Song Dynasty philosopher and politician who excerpted the great learning from the Book of Rice. More? Zushi. All right, so we have 10 on that. And this is toss-up 6. Disagreements over whether or not to undergo this process were the subject of the suicide paragraph of the coalitions of Jan Persusa and Jens Stoltenberg. Politicians signed the Snagov Declaration agreeing to undergo this process. On Enger Lonstein led the no side in a referendum which rejected a plan to undergo this process in 1994. The A8 group of states underwent this process simultaneously. In order to undergo this process, countries must meet the Copenhagen criteria.
Joining the EU.
Yes. To remove a plasmid backbone from a PCR sample before cloning, you can use DPN1 digestion, which targets N6 adenine with this characteristic. 10 points each. Name this epigenetic modification, often incorporated into E. coli strains with DAM or DCM sites. MBO1 is sensitive to the presence of this modification, which in eukaryotes often occur at CPG sites.
Yes.
Answer. This is methylation. The methyl cytosines in CPG sites are especially prone to deamination into this other DNA nucleobase denoted T. In RNA, it is replaced with uracil. A namesake technique for detecting methylation sites uses this compound followed by an alkali desulfonation step to convert cytosines into uracils while leaving methyl cytosines intact.
Is there a better option?
Okay. So sodium bisulfite, 10 on that box. Concept 7. In 2013, Zhang et al. Produced versions of these compounds with differing stoichiometric ratios using high-pressure diamond anvil cells. This compound is produced as a side product in addition to ammonia in Olin-Raschig process for industrial production of hydrazine. This is the lighter of the 2 compounds commonly used to make sample plates for IR spectroscopy. It's not a phosphate compound, but this is the compound present in highest concentration in a solution commonly used to wash cells prior to dissociation. A solution containing this compound is used to remove any aqueous workup from the organic layer during liquid-liquid extraction. This cubic crystal compound forms a mineral called halite. For 10 points, in this ionic compound symbolized NaCl.
Table salt?
Yes. Norman Mailer narrated the rise of John F. Kennedy during the 1960 Democratic Convention in Los Angeles in an article for this magazine entitled Superman Comes to the Supermarket. For 10 points each, in this men's magazine, which also published Gay Talisa's article, Frank Sinatra Has a Cold.
Men's are. Do we have anything? Playboys are.
Ezra?
You know Playboy.
Esquire. Those Esquire articles are considered part of this 1960s and 1970s movement that incorporated techniques of subjective first-person narration into reporting. Its other proponents included Joan Didion. Answer.
New journalism?
The term New Journalism was coined in a 1973 anthology by this white-suited author of The Bonfire of the Vanities and The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test.
Wolf?
Yes, that's 20 on that, and here is toss of 8. A woman called May May inquires of a man with this title after that aging father buries a reclusive doctor. A character with this title is nearly swindled out of his dead son's prize cockerel by Savato in that...
Colonel.
Yes.
Oh.
Giuseppe Donizetti was invited to compose the first Ottoman national anthem during this period. 10 points each. It was a period of reform in the Ottoman Empire begun by the rescript of the Rose Chamber. This period included the abolition of the millet system and the elimination of tax farming. Shortly before the Tanzimat reforms were introduced, this elite infantry corps was disbanded. These privileged soldiers were recruited from Christian boys kidnapped under the Devshirme system.
Janissaries.
This sultan disbanded the Janissaries and put down their revolt in the auspicious incident. This father of Abdul Majid I planned many of the Tanzimat reforms that were put into motion during his son's reign. Answer. This is Mahmud II, 20 points. Plus of 9. The second king of this name expelled the usurper Zavis of Falkenstein and conquered Krakow to claim an additional throne. The fourth king of this name ordered the murder of John of Nepomuk during a struggle with Archbishop Jan of Yenstein. The first king of this name was raised by his grandmother, a martyr who was strangled at Tetten Castle by forces of the pagan regent, his mother Drahomira. This name was borne by the protege of St. Ludmilla, who was killed after refusing to fight Henry the Fowler. The first king of this name was succeeded by his younger brother Boleslav the Cruel. No. Who continued his Premyslid dynasty. For 10 points, give this name of 4 kings of Bohemia, the first of whom looked out on the feast of Stephen in a Christmas carol about him being a good king.
Okay. Wenceslas?
Yes. In early June 2017, the Volcan de Fuego in Guatemala near this town erupted violently, killing 62 people on the first day. 10 points each. In this tourist town, known for its Spanish Baroque architecture left from the colonial period, such as the Santa Catalina Arch. In the 18th century, it was rocked by the Santa Marta earthquake.
Antigua.
After just one day, the Volcan de Fuego eruption was already deadlier than the ongoing eruption of this U.S. volcano. After a fire hose spouted lava into the ocean in 2017 from this volcano, it began in 2018 to erupt on a large scale, with rifts opening up all across its island.
Kilauea?
Kilauea is located on the big island of this U.S. state. Most of the names for types of lava, such as Pahoehoe and A, come from this state's indigenous language.
Hawaii.
And that's 30. Just toss of 10. An artist from this country wrote the wordless song September, sometimes called this country's wedding song, on an album whose title translates to New Time. That artist from this country is Ivan Lins. A friction drum from this country that makes a high-pitched squeaking sound is the kuia. A black and a mixed-race child sit on a roadside on the cover of an iconic popular album in this country, whose name means the Corner Club. That album is by Milton Nascimento and Lo Borges. For 10 points, in this country, whose popular music incorporated the developments made by Antonio Carlos Jobim, João Gilberto,
Brazil.
that's 10. The expectation value of this operation applied to an operator and the Hamiltonian appears in a general form of Ehrenfest's theorem. 10 points each. In this operation, the result of this operation applied to the position and momentum operators is I times h bar.
This operation.
What?
Answer.
Commutation.
Say that again?
Commutation.
Oh.
No, commutator. The product of these two values for the position and momentum operators is bounded below by h bar over 2.
What? Oh, this value for standard deviation.
Yeah. That fundamental result of quantum mechanics is an uncertainty principle named for this German physicist.
Yeah, Heisenberg.
And that's for 20. We are at halftime. So we have the score as it stands, and then talk about those.
The score is 65, Virginia A, 175, Illinois A.
Or, yeah, 65, good. Could you read me the text of the first part of that?
Which one?
No, the one just now. The one on the commutator.
The expectation value of this operation applied to an operator in the Hamiltonian appears in the general form of Ehrenfest's theorem, 10 each in this operation. The result of this operation applied to the position and momentum operators is I times h bar.
I think commutation should be correct on that one. I want to correct that too, because it's the operation, not the operators. I think you're correct on that.
That's. I think they're gonna figure that out.
Yeah, they're going to check these things right now. So let's talk about it. It's been.
Five.
You know what?
I mean, if you know it, get it.
You know what I mean? Just hit straight from the middle. I mean, you.
All right. This is going to take a second.
That's correct. I think you're right. So this would be great. I don't know. They're checking on it right now. Yeah.
And what about commutator generation?
I asked them. They'll make it. They're good stuff. We'll see what happens.
Okay, but it's not two separate depictions in the painting side. Yeah, I think that's okay. Well, we have other protests as well. So
Okay, can you type that in for me real quick? Because I didn't hear it.
I was thinking you should join the because like these countries make this simple.
Yeah, so it says not when they send
break up the USSR. So what do you break up
oh, but not because it couldn't have.
I don't know. Ask him.
There's no way 8 countries did it like together.
No, you got it. Like everything. I thought you just keep coming up with good guesses. You get it.
Making this bonus is actually really hard.
Yes, it was. And like, I mean, that's what I'm saying. You do it.
Yeah, like the fact that the guy, the easy part was just the guy what that's in.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Tell him maybe no. I don't know what I'm doing.
I was like, I was thinking they sound like vaguely Russian, like he's not.
Yeah, so I was thinking Siberia the whole time. And then like,
Oh, and then it's
and then
in
this then this happens.
That itself is like,
What is the, what's like the other dark Oh, that's, who's up in that?
Yeah.
Probably, and then probably like, in the kernel. Which, yeah.
He knew what my boss.
But we both wait. Look at
Stay low.
like it was about the same time. It was 85. And now it's like
Oh, yeah.
we do the same thing.
Okay. Pass it down.
Oh, those fascinating people with that.
First time we thought like we're not in the game.
They just drive back though, right?
That's my guess.
Just like take it down. Miami. Oh, okay. So
Variables that, so, no, I don't.
it's like I don't write it. Okay.
This is what
We should be able to finish this in time when we get
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Both protests are being accepted. On the first one, it's the picture actually shows chloris turning into flora. There are two forms of the same person. It has to be accepted. And the second one, yes, commutation is accepted for commutator as a synonym that is used. So, with that in account, what is the score now?
Score is now 65 still for Virginia A. 195 now is for Illinois A.
Okay. All right, we're ready to resume? Okay, this is toss-up 11. A thought experiment considering Congress members is used to criticize these procedures in Jacob Cohen's essay, The Earth is Round. Sturra Holm co-names a method used to counteract error rates in some types of this procedure. In these procedures, the Bonferroni correction may be employed to render the results more accurate. The generalized form of this procedure typically involves considering the distribution of 2 times the log of capital lambda. The superiority of a particular type of this procedure is established by the Neyman-Pearson lemma. The size of one of these procedures is typically denoted by alpha, and the
Is this a census?
No. And the calculation of a statistic in the critical region leads to the rejection of H0 in these procedures. For 10 points in this type of procedure in which null and alternative models are contrasted to determine if data is statistically significant.
Test.
More?
Statistical test.
More? Time. Hypothesis test or significance test. All right, and that brings us to toss-up 12. During this election, New York's William P. Van Ness sent a secret letter to Edward Livingston detailing an ultimately failed plan to defeat the winning candidate. This election was the subject of the pamphlet The Prospect Before Us by James Cowley.
1800?
Yes.
Yes.
This composer wrote a ballet where the title character is born in the first tableau, then in the second instructs Calliope, Terpsichore, and Polyhymnia. 10 points each from his composer up Apollo, who also wrote the Dumbarton Oaks Concerto. The Concerto for Viola d'Amore is the 6th entry in this composer's Camo Music series. His Ludus Tonalis contains a prelude, 12 fugues that alternate with interludes, and a postlude. It's Paul Hindemith. Camera music, along with Apollo and the Dumbarton Oaks Concerto, are in this style of music, embraced by Hindemith and Stravinsky in the 1920s. Yes, 20. Class of 13. Michael Baxendale argued that barrel gauging and other forms of commercial mathematics influenced this painter's use of geometric forms. A thesis that one of this man's paintings depicts Bessarion trying to convince Federico of Urbino to launch a crusade was supported by Carlo Ginzburg. A fresco by this man, which Aldous Huxley described as the best picture in the world, depicts 4 sleeping guards in front of Jesus, who raises a flag and lifts his foot onto a sarcophagus. Besides that version of the resurrection, he painted a scene with 3 men in a courtyard on the right, one in a blue and gold robe, as Christ is tied to a pillar topped by a gold statue and whipped. For 10 points, name this early Renaissance painter of the flagellation of Christ.
Pura?
Yes.
Nice.
This property can be determined by comparing enantiomers. 10 points each. And its property that measures if a molecule can be superimposed on its mirror image. Centers with this property are assigned an orientation by the CIP rules.
Carelli?
A mixture that has equal amounts of left-handed and right-handed enantiomers is referred to with this term.
Racemic?
A mixture of 2 enantiomers is characterized by this quantity, which is the difference between the percentages of the 2 enantiomers.
Property. Concentration.
It's the EE or the enantiomeric excess. 20. That's up 14. The path integral formulation for these particles involves using Grassmann numbers. The Gross-Naveau and Nambu-Jonah-Lacinio theories model the interaction of 4 of these particles. Deborah Jin used potassium-40 atoms cooled to 5 times 10 to the negative 8th kelvins to produce these particles named, say, condensate. Observing neutrinoless double beta decay would prove the existence of one type of these.
Fermion.
Yes.
Nice.
Before 2013, the smallest of these things ever created was made in the Bolivar state of Colombia. 10 points each. Name these objects. One of these objects, marked with a map of Paraguay and the Spanish for has been, is, and will be, was a cause of the Chaco War.
Oh, it's like what caused it? Like oil. Did they
Answer.
Like oil?
This is a stamp.
Oh,
The
I see.
has been, is, and will be stamps created uproar in this country, which Paraguay fought against during the Chaco War. This country lost its access to the sea during the War of the Pacific.
Bolivia.
The world's most valuable stamp, the 1-cent magenta, was also created in South America when supplies failed to arrive in this colony. The 1823 Demerara Rebellion in this colony was led by Jack Gladstone against British plantation owners.
Wait, colony, right? Oh, British Guiana.
Yes,
Okay.
that's 20. So 15. A thought experiment in this book imagines a sequence of 9 cases from brutal slavery to apparently free elections, asking at what point one is no longer a slave. A footnote in this book asks whether utilitarian goal-centered views can be reconciled with the author's view of rights as side constraints on action. This book formulates a Lockean proviso to determine when property acquisition is just, and it imagines 1 million people freely choosing to give money to Wilt Chamberlain.
Anarchy State Utopia.
Yes. This field was co-founded by Jacob Mincer in 1965. 10 points each. In the subfield of economics, which uses allocation of time theory to analyze the impact of parents choosing not to join the workforce and the allocation of resources within the family unit.
Did labor economics or
Just go for it.
Answer.
labor economics?
This is New Home Economics. New Home Economics was co-founded by this Chicago-based economist, who also advanced a rational choice theory of crime and collaborated with Kevin Murphy on rational addiction theory.
I'm just wondering.
Answer.
Friedman.
Gary Becker. The 1964 Becker book was named for this 2-word phrase. It refers to the body of skills which give labor its value and is named in analogy to a classical factor of production.
No. 2 words.
Answer.
Skill sets.
This is human capital. So it's 0 on that bonus, and we'll check the score after 15.
The score is 125 Virginia A, 230 Illinois A.
What's 6 left? Oh, 5. Sorry.
Right. Toss of 16. A poem by James D. Carruthers describes a competition with this man while they whiz a hoeing into corn. In a patriotic poem, this writer praises those noble sons of Ham who fought for Uncle Sam. This writer took out a loan to publish his first collection, Oak and Ivy, whose shorter second section is composed of dialect poems. Some critics have argued that this author expressed frustration with his white patrons in a poem describing how, with torn and bleeding hearts, we smile. This poet described a motive in one of his poems as a plea that upward to heaven he flings, and a line from that poem, Sympathy, was used as the title. Yes. Dunbar. This creature was confused when Ortygia was covered with waves to fulfill a prophecy that a woman could only give birth where the sun did not shine. 10 points each. Name is Dragon Oracle, who was killed by a 4-day-old Apollo. Python. Python attempted to prevent Apollo's birth by stalking this mother of Apollo and Artemis. Python lived at this landmark. Pyrrha and Deucalion emerged from the flood at this place. Yes, that's 20. Toss 17. This group's rise supplanted similar forces led by Tinker Fox. Christopher Hill argued that William Urbery was able to describe this force as the army of God with a theology centered on Adam. Robert Lockyer, a member of this force, was executed for his role in the Bishopsgate Mutiny while serving in the regiment of Edward Whalley. Agitators in this group argue with grandees such as Henry Ireton at the Putney debates. The Earls of Essex and Manchester. Yes. This character first appears talking about the smell of train compartments for 10 points each. Name is Character, apparently the most successful salesman in the play Glengarry Glen Ross, even though he loses a sale to James Link when Link becomes unnerved after the break-in. Yes. Roma was created by this playwright, and like many of the other characters in Glengarry, enjoys swearing a lot. A controversial scene in Glengarry Glen Ross that was cut in later productions features the characters Moss, Arano, and Roma disdainfully commenting on trying to sell real estate to a person with this surname who wouldn't sign even if Shiva handed him $1 million. Yes, 30 points. Awesome. 18. Anselmus is cursed by a woman who sells these things after he knocks down her wares in the E.T.A. Hoffman story, The Golden Pot. A Rainer Maria Rilke poem mourns how we will never know the eyes of a headless archaic torso, which are compared to these things. In another story, a woman runs in her underclothes to stop a man who filled his pockets from throwing these things at his son. A rotting one of these things is surrounded by white dust after it has lodged itself in Gregor Samsa's abdomen. California Representative Richard T. Hanna was convicted for accepting $200,000 in bribes from this country, 10 points each. Name this country whose KCIA spy agency attempted to gain influence in Congress by funneling bribes through Park Tong-sun during the 1970s. This country's president at the time was Park Chung-hee.
South Korea.
This Speaker of the House was brought down by the Koreagate scandal. After Spiro Agnew's resignation, this politician was second in line to President Nixon until Gerald Ford's appointment as vice president.
No, before him, like, starts with a C maybe?
Yes, sir. Carl Albert. As Speaker, Albert reached the highest political office of anyone from this state, whose two statues in the Capitol building are of Sequoia and Will Rogers. Prominent politicians from this state include Mary Fallon and Scott Pruitt.
Oh, I think, like, Will Rogers was wrong.
Yeah.
Oklahoma?
Yes, that's for 20. Check the score with 2 tosses left.
The score is 195 Virginia A, 250 Illinois A.
260.
Did they 20 that?
We did
20 on the bonus we just did.
Yeah, South Korea and Oklahoma.
260 is the right.
Go back to 13.
Oh, okay.
13 was what? Was that something we just did up to 190? After the process?
Yes, at 13. So at 13 was 190 for Illinois A.
Okay, and what was 14?
14 they got 10 plus
10,
20.
we got Bolivia and British Guiana.
Okay, wait a minute. So for 14, what is the total at 14 for Illinois?
At 14, the score was 125 to 220.
Can we take a time out?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right, we're doing the scores? All right, time to be called to it.
Not that good, but let me see.
Time's out. Yeah.
You can do this. You can do this.
Okay.
81. Take it home.
Let's go with okay.
Very well put.
So with two toss-ups left, the score was 195 for Virginia A, 260 for Illinois.
All right, and this is toss-up 19. This person hired an indigenous woman named Tarita to play his love interest, rewrote a script to move the title shipboard event to a flashback, and effectively took over directing himself from Carol Reed in a troubled film in which he portrayed Fletcher Christian. A character played by this man confesses to Edie while his words were drowned out by the sound of a ship's whistle and machinery. While playing a motorcycle gang member, this actor asked, "What do you got?" after being asked what he was rebelling against. In another film, this star of The Wild One played the brother of Charlie the Gent, who works for gangster Johnny Friendly. In that film, this actor's character of Terry Malloy is a former boxer.
Brando?
Yes. Answer the following about parameter estimation and statistics for 10 points each. In this frequentist technique, the parameter estimates are those under which the observed data would be most probable to occur.
Do you got anything? I'm not sure.
Answer. Maximum likelihood estimation. Often contrasted with the frequentist approach, this method of inference uses both a prior distribution on the parameter space and a likelihood function to obtain a posterior distribution for the parameters.
Yeah, just throw some out.
Bayesian inference. The MLE is equivalent to picking the posterior mode in the Bayesian framework when this prior distribution is imposed. When this distribution is discrete, every outcome in the sample space has the same probability of occurring. Yes, demos. And final toss-up. Chilean local traditions tell of a ghostly one of these objects known as the Calayuche. A self-operating one of these objects known as Scooptina is owned by Mananan Maclear. One of these objects is owned by Freya and, like her hall, has the name Sesrumnir. Utnapishtim creates a giant one of these objects called the Preserver of Life. A competition involving two stone examples of these. Yes. Statues of this deity called Mizuko or Water Child are dressed in red caps and bibs to memorialize and entreat the protection of miscarried, aborted, or stillborn fetuses. 10 points each to Miss Bodhisattva, who vowed to remain until all hells are emptied and is thought to help deceased children in those worlds.
Avalokiteshvara?
No, Ojizo. The practice of Mizuko Kuyo is common in this East Asian country, where Buddhism is syncretized with the native religion Shintoism.
Japan.
In the 19th century, the Japanese government tried to end the syncretism of Shinto and Buddhism, known as Shinbutsu Shugo. That word for this syncretism refers to the jumbling up of Buddhas and these figures, the beings revered in Shinto practice, which range from ancestral spirits to personifications of natural phenomena. You receive 20 points, and that is the game.
How come we can't win math?
Oh God. Thank you. Oh, that's
The last line was.